Okay, so I'll just paste this. So I'm not going to do any animation of this, but just as a little recap, let's just see where we are. Okay, I'll just duplicate this layer. And I'll just change it. Let's just give it a color. Okay. So what we have is some type. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it 3D. So let's just talk about how After Effects can create 3 dimensions. So when we talk about 3 dimensions, just as an example, if I have, I've just hit the P key, so I've got position. And so what we have is the first block of numbers is the X, so that's horizontal. The second block is Y, vertical. So we do know there are 3 dimensions. So horizontal, vertical. Now, how do we create a 3D layer? Well, this is how we do it. So at the moment, if we look right down the bottom of the screen, you just see the bottom of my face, we are looking at the second block. So I'm going to make this the first block. Okay? So what we have is, well, some little boxes that we can tick. We'll talk about some of these other ones a bit later, but what we do have is this Q. So I tick that and I've just put in a 3rd dimension. Okay? So with that, I'll just hit the P key. We have X, Y, and we now have Z. So the Z dimension, horizontal, X, vertical, Y, Z is actually forward and back. Okay? So in doing this, well, we have to have a look at this a little differently. Because we're just looking at this text. In fact, all the graphics that we've created so far have been from a default front view. So the other views, we could look at it from the top, we could look at it from the bottom, from the right, from the left, from behind. They're the 3 dimensions. Okay? And we can, and we're not going to complicate things, we can actually put a camera into this view and look through the camera at the work we've created. We're just going to keep it simple and just keep it looking from, well, a front point of view. But we're actually going to make the text have 3 dimensions. So the way things work now is, let's just bring this up. Now you can see, well, we've actually got a new set of arrows, and we even have this here. So we've actually got a color code. I have to say this in an American accent, so it works. So RGB, red, green, blue, X, Y, Z. Okay, red is X, blue is Y, Z, no, green is Y, blue is Z. So what I'll do, and I have to sort of come over here, I've just looked at this from two views now, and I've got to just come over, here we go. So with my camera views, I'm just going to click on this window, which I'm going to say I'm looking from the top down. Okay? And of course, what we have is, well, we can't see it from the top because it doesn't actually have any breadth, depth, it's just a flat layer. So what I'll do, and so we can see our axis point. Now, the axis point is, as it's happened by default, at the very bottom on the right. So for this to work, let's have a look at the rotation. And so what we have is we have X rotation, Y rotation, and Z rotation. So when we talk about the rotation, it's like we've got a pin through the graphic content. Okay? So if I have a pin through a shape, that's the direction it will move. So if I have a pin from the top through, that's the Y. If I have it rotate, it will rotate that way. If I have a pin through the horizontal, it will rotate that way. And if I have a pin through the Z, which is basically right through the middle of it, it will rotate what we see anti-clockwise and clockwise. So let's have a look. So if I rotate on the let's say the Y first, and I'll just put in 90 degrees. Well, actually, before I do that, I'll just undo that. I'll just scroll. And of course, this is animatable. Okay? And you can see from the top, the left view, how this is working. Okay? From the X, again, we're looking at it from the top down, and we can see it because it's gone flat. So let's just work with this then. Now, I will say we can really overcomplicate things in 3D. In fact, you will overcomplicate things. I know that. Because what will start to happen is we're starting to look at things as if we were looking through a camera. And so when we look through a camera, we're looking through a lens. That lens, you've heard of a wide-angle lens, sort of warps things and sees things. That's what starts to happen because cameras have lenses. They're not a flat thing. And so angles and things don't quite work. Anyway, let's just come back here. Let's just undo what we've just done. And let's just put some keyframes in. So I'll do a X, okay? And I'll just come back, no, let's just say half a second. Minus 90. Okay? And so, let's just play what we've got. We'll play this one. Okay? So, what I would recommend, and this is what I was talking about with the lenses, you will not get flat where you cannot not see it, all right? So it's probably best to put in an opacity fade in this, okay? So in this way, let's just do that. So I'll bring up the opacity as well, so option T, and let's just make it fade in about there, and just bring it down to 0. Okay. So what we can do is we can bring text up in 3D. Now, it is really important to understand that in any composition that you create, and let's just say suddenly we wanted this to all be in 3D, if we wanted to see all of this, because it needs to be so, we need to put 3D layers on everything that we want to see. If it doesn't have it, we won't see it. Okay? Even though we're only just looking at it from the front. Okay? So what we have there is the starting point of 3D. Now, of course, I can adjust that. Don't go crazy, I will say. There's a tendency to have things spinning around like some sort of Royal Easter show ride. You know, it makes you vomit. But don't do that, because you do that to the viewer and they don't enjoy it. Okay? Don't throw dizziness into the spell. Okay, so with that, so let's just say I don't want to do that. I'll just delete, bring it down, bring it back, and let's just do the rotation again. And so let's say I'll rotate with the Y rotation. Okay? So with this Y rotation, let's just go back and I'll just rotate it minus 90 degrees. Okay, so just know that 90 degrees and minus 90 degrees are the opposite, okay, in this 3D. So I'll do that. So you just got to experiment. Okay, so let's see that in another way. So maybe I'll change that just to straight 90. Okay, so as I said, just that little fade in is quite important because you won't hide something, okay, because of the camera. So far, so good? Okay. All right, well, I'll just go back to the one view for a moment, and I'm coming over here. So I'm going to use a video ground. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this video into a cube. That is I can put 6 sides of this video, put it together with all these different sides, okay? Now, I'll just use video, but any sort of shape, texture, type, anything can be made into 3D. So let's just work with this. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw something new into the mix. I have alluded to it in the past, but let's go. Okay, so I've got this video, and what I want it to do is I want it to be the faces of a cube. Okay? Just so we can see it, I won't worry about putting faces on the right and on the left, so it's sort of hollow. And that way we'll see what's going on. So I'm going to put it into a mask. So just remembering, we can create a mask fairly easily. By creating a shape directly on that layer. Okay? So that's a mask. And so that is video. You know, if you wanted to make a television set or a movie screen, you can create a shape and have it looking like whatever. Okay? So that is one side. So we're looking at that from the front. So what we'll do, okay, so it's already got a 3D layer there. So I've clicked on my little cube. Very important. And so now I'm going to build this cube. So just for this, I might be best to get my anchor points all sorted. Transform, center, anchor point, and layer content. And just so what I better do is I'll just move that down to the bottom. Okay, because I'm going to duplicate. So I've now got 2 of them. So I'll just call this one the front. And I've put this, I'm going to create the bottom first, because that's going to give me the width that the back is going to be. Okay, so we'll change this to 2 views. Okay, so we're looking at this from the top down. So of course, that's what it looks like. So let's rotate this. So if I want this to go from looking at it like that to that, what's the axis I'm using?
Z. Z.
Z is like the pin's right through it. It's the X. Okay, so just imagine there's a pin through it, so it's a horizontal pin. So let's just get our rotation happening, and let's just make this, well, again, I'll just scroll to 90, and you can see that it's coming down. So that's rotated 90 degrees. So I probably want to go back 90 if I've got the front. So I can just come in here, minus 90. Okay? So we've got that. So now, so this is, I'll just tap the return, just call it the bottom. All right. So I'll duplicate the front and I'm going to move it on the z-axis to the back. So I'll get my position. And this is why I'm looking at it from the top down. I can actually see the width. Unfortunately, in After Effects, we don't have a ruler grid as accurate as we would like, okay? So let's just call that the back. And let's just duplicate the bottom, and that will become the top. Again, position. And you can see on the front, I'm moving it up to the top. I might have to come in and tweak things when I start looking at it. So if I have a look at this from the right-hand side now, you can see what I've got. Okay, you can see that maybe that needs to come down a little bit. So, just as I said, we've got colour coding, RGB, XYZ. X red, Y green, blue, Z blue. Okay? So it's a very, very handy thing. So if you've done any 3D before, that's the colour code that you have. So, now what I want to do is I want to rotate all of these planes in unison to match. I want it to look like a spinning cube. So this is where the magical null object comes into being. I have mentioned the null object, but not given it emphasis. A null object is an object that exists, but we can't see it. Okay? It's an invisible object. But that invisible object, we're actually going to animate. Okay, so we've got our null. And what I want to do is I want to put this null object in the exact centre of these planes. Just centre my anchor point, and let's just get our position. Oh, I better put a 3D on the null object, and I'll bring it in. I'll do my best. So I'm looking at it from the front. Okay. Got the null object roughly in the centre. I'm looking at it from the right-hand side. It's pretty well in the centre. Let's have a look at it from the top. Roughly in the centre. Okay? So now this is where things get interesting. I'll just change my view. So I'm changing my two views. I'm just going to have a look at this one, which is active. I'll change it back to the right-hand side. Okay, there it is. And so here we have these things called parenting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the null the parent of those planes. And so we have these things here. So this is called a pick whip. And what I can do is I can drag to it, or I can do it from here. And so now anything that I do to this null object, all of those other planes or shapes will do the same thing. So for example, if I just get my position, just go back to one view. Okay, I'm just animating, I've just got the position of moving the null object, and everything is actually moving at the same time. So that means if I rotate, and so what we'll do, I'll do a Y rotation, okay? Again, so I'll just say, yep. Well, actually, let's do it the front end way. So you saw earlier how I can rotate specific angles. So it's assumed that you understand 360 degrees is a full rotation. 359 degrees is almost a full rotation. 180 degrees, half, 90 degrees, etc. So that's in this first set of numbers here. But what I can do, I can say, okay, well, how many times do I want to rotate it? So let's just say 3 times. So I'm just going to okay, and that's video rotating. All right. Okay, so that's all well and good. So just to further take this, what I might do is I might put a camera in this now. Okay, so I'm actually going to put, and so when we talk about cameras, you've all heard of a 35mm camera. That's your standard photographic camera. The cameras that you put into these are working on 35mm. Now I'm going to just talk you through some things. Handily, I will recommend this. I'm not going to get into the specifics of 1-node cameras or 2-node cameras. You don't need to know too much. Just make it 1 node. It makes it as simple to animate as possible. 2 nodes and you've got things going everywhere. Now, in photography, if you buy a 35mm camera, digital or the old-fashioned SLR, in the box, the lens that you will get is a 50mm lens. Standard, flat, normal. Okay, so you've heard of wide-angle lenses, you've heard of telephoto lenses, yep. A wide-angle lens is a lens measurement that is less than 50mm. So, no, an 18mm lens is a quite, not so much fisheye, but it's getting there. And so what it's doing is it's putting more of the vision into the frame. It's actually really pushing it out, and you start to see, you know, telegraph poles on slants and this sort of thing. So that is there. A telephoto lens, which is like a telescope, is like looking at, well, as telescope. We look at things a long way away. So we know anything above 50 is a telescopic lens. So just keep it 50, just so that you're not warping everything, because you put a wide angle lens and suddenly everything gets warped, which is interesting, but just work out how you're doing it first. Okay, And so now I've created a camera. So I can now view and render through this camera. So the camera, well, that's got all the attributes of things that we can animate. Position, rotation, okay? Scale not so much. But if I, so X, Y, Z, okay, let's look at this from the top. Okay, and I'll just zoom out of this. Okay, there's my camera. So I can make things move closer or further away. Okay? And so with this, okay, so that's not scale, that's actual three-dimensional movement. Okay? So it means I can actually set up things in planes, closer, further back, and I can have a camera going through. Okay? Again, I don't expect everyone to get this. It's a completely different way of thinking. I remember teaching 3D at UTS, and so at UTS in the design department there was visual communications, which is graphic, fashion design, interior design, industrial or object design. Industrial design, fashion design and interior design all deal with 3 dimensions. Fashion is in 3 dimensions, a room is in 3 dimensions, a product is in 3 dimensions. Poor old graphic designers are just flat 2D people because that's all we do. We draw on paper that's flat. So it's completely possible that your brains do not actually have a 3-dimensional synapse. Okay, it might not exist unless you've sculpted or made things in 3D. You might not actually have the brain to actually do it. So it will grow, but don't expect it to sort of happen and be there. You actually need your motor neurons to actually create new pathways in your brain to comprehend this. Okay? I had graphic designers and they're turning the computer on its side, trying to see it from the side. Okay? It's not normal unless you've done 3D. Okay? So it's something that you may need to get into to, well, have the capacity to think about this. So let's animate a camera going in and out while we're doing this. So we'll start a long way away. Well, actually what I should do is maybe we'll do this. And I can actually move from here. Okay. So what we have there, now, if I really wanted to mess things up, I could have it spinning on the other axes, tumbling around like a sideshow ride. Other things that we could do though, which is interesting, is I'll just come back to the 2 views and let's just come in here and Okay, I might just duplicate this layer. I'll take none and I'll move it. Okay, can you see what I've just done? I've duplicated the front and I've actually moved it forward. Do this one, sorry. So the camera is moving past that. All right? Does that sort of make sense? It's quite profound that we can have things, the camera moving, things moving past the point of view. Okay? So, in a nutshell, how do we explain what we've just done? Well, we've got the idea that we can use the third dimension to bring things into view, okay? But also what we can do is we can actually create three-dimensional shapes. You actually have to create them. There is a native 3D program called Cinema 4D that Adobe has that if you can get, you'll get the light version. It does actually cost to have the full version. But if you've used things like Blender or Maya before, which are 3D programs model, you can actually bring them into After Effects. Okay, so we won't worry about that. So just in talking about all of this, then 3D can start to come into being. Okay? Any questions? How about we stop things there? And I'll stop recording.